And here we are at long last. Dr. Keith, good to see you, man.
Good to see you. I apologize to everybody that I'm late. And I will admit exactly what happened. I spaced out on this. I was eating lunch and I started watching this movie called Maxine, and I was all fascinated with it. And then, wow, God, it's just 2:00. I'll stop watching. And then my phone rang and I went, oh my God. So anyway, I apologize, but I'm ready to go. I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad everybody who's joined us has joined us.
I'm glad you're here too. And and no problem at all. These things happen. I mean, we've been doing the show for so long now, Keith. I'm surprised it hasn't happened more often. And as you say, this is not something that generally, we're usually both pretty good at being here on time. And every now and again, stuff happens.
I've never done this before, and I've done hundreds of podcasts.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the fuck. Anyway,
it must have been a really good movie.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess. I mean, and also I've been practicing a lot, so maybe my unconscious thought I'd already given the talk.
Oh, maybe. Maybe. So yeah, let's get into it. So today we are here to detangle the drama triangle.
We sure are. Okay, well, look. First of all, I'm really glad to see you, Corey.
Yeah. You too.
And how are you doing? How are you doing, my man?
I'm doing well enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
I'm doing great as always. I'm always doing great.
Every time I ask you, I get the same answer.
I do. I'm not bullshitting either. I mean, I know that my life will get shitty at some point. It's just been years since it's been shitty, I know it'll happen someday. Nothing just goes like that. Anyway. So I'm looking forward to this. Like I said, I practice, these things when I drive to the pool.
Right.
And one of the things about integral that I love, and this is true for, I think, all deep knowledge systems, they go from very, very simple to very complex. Mm. And okay, like, absolute truth, pure, unchanging emptiness. Relative truth, everything else. Okay, that's at the center. Aqua, quadrants, levels, line states, and types. What could be simpler than that?
Right.
Well, that spreads out into the cosmos, into pure empiricism on one side, pure spirituality on the other, connected with interlocking scaffoldings that all make sense through 4 quadrants. So drama and problem solving are like that. Mm. So you can look at a human life, at our lives together with each other, because, we're ultra social. It's social all the time, relationships with ourselves, with each other. And we're either problem solving or we're in drama. Regular life with normal crazy people like ourselves is we wake up and we make decisions and we run into problems and we solve them. Mm-hmm. The normal person has made 1,000 decisions in the first 90 minutes of their waking life. And a lot of those there's a problem, I got to solve it. And in relationships, we're always solving problems. Our intersubjectivity, really, a conversation is a series of attunements and adjustments. 2 people being flexible and adaptable and adjusting to each other, like what just happened. Okay. I am so reliable. I'm such a conscientious, reliable person. You wouldn't think to look at me, because I laugh a lot, but I'm conscientious. Anyway, conscientious, reliable, keep just fucking spaced out. And Corey goes, oh, I got a problem I got to solve. I somehow get through to him because I know intuitively that somehow Keith is offline in some fashion. And I just got to invite him back online. And I'm almost impossible to get a hold of. No, so you had to call 2 or 3 times. You made my phone ring. You're the only person that's made my phone ring, and in the last 2 or 3 months. I still don't know how you did it.
I don't either. I hacked you. I hacked your system.
Okay, so you solved the problem. I saw it. It just flipped out. I got my computer and my cords went running down here and was trying to find the Riverside connection. I solved the problem. And now here we are, okay? Problem solving. Problem solving generally feels pretty good. We're feeling pretty good now because we're solving problems. The other thing that people do is drama. Now, what drama is not problem solving. Drama is somebody either being a victim. I'm stuck in a problem that I can't solve myself. I just can't do it. I have no agency, and I'm kind of invested in being a victim. You notice I'm making the V for victim.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody, if I act pitiful enough or something, somebody will come and try to rescue me. They'll try to help me out in my problem. Now, if I receive that help and get empowered, I'm not being a victim. I'm being a human being solving problems. You know, we have problems. We ask each other for help all the time. That's not being a victim. Being a victim is you try to help me solve my problem. And what I really want is I don't want to give up my victim status, but I want you to make me more comfortable. Classic example, somebody is an alcoholic and they go, well, I want you to help me out here. You're living in the house, mother, father, daughter, son, whoever. But, help me be more comfortable, anything other than addressing the real issue, which is drinking, if that's alcoholism. Mm-hmm. And then there's a rescuer that tries to solve. And then every once in a while, someone gets pissed off and tries to hammer some sense into somebody, that a persecutor. And then people who go from the rescuer, the persecutor to the victim. It's called the Stephen Karpman triangle, after the psychologist Stephen Karpman in the 70s came up with this. Okay, so nothing gets done on the triangle. Nothing is accomplished. No problems are solved. It's just this over and over again. Now, the drama triangle got really popular in the 70s in two big groups of people. One was the recovery community. Because anybody who is in recovery community knows that the number one thing you are when you're an addict is a victim. And you're trying to get everybody else to make it more comfortable for you to stay in your victimhood being an addict. And they could see the triangle everywhere. And so it was very popular with them. And it was very popular with people who did transactional analysis. Eric Berne, the guy who wrote Games People Play, which is a famous book in the 70s. He accurately saw that everything was relationships, and he saw that there were two kinds of relationships, interestingly. There was people that were just relating, just being authentic with each other, kind of like you and me doing the dialectic. And then there was people where they did something on the top, like pretending to have a conversation. Below the surface, they were manipulating each other. They were on the triangle. Okay? And he called that playing games. He said, that's game playing, that's not relating. And so he intuitively saw the same thing. Okay? All right, so fast forward 50 years to this last several months, I've been talking a lot about personality disorders. Because first of all, I'm fascinated with them. And second of all, I found a guy who's the best guy in the world on it. And I got 19 hours of instruction from him in a manual, which is like Halloween for Keith. Somebody just gave me a big bag of candy and said, hey, you spend the next 2 months eating this. And not only that, you can keep eating it. Like something like that. You eat it, and then you get to eat it again. I was sitting in front of my ultraviolet Juve thing this morning, listening to him talk about something for the fourth or fifth time. Mm-hmm. And what he did the simple thing. He said, problem solving and drama. And your job, if you're a therapist, is to help people problem solve and help people learn how to observe drama and adjust it to problem solving. And basically, there's two kinds of people who do this. There's normal crazy people and there's extra crazy people. Normal crazy people have some capacity to observe themselves doing drama and make an adjustment. Extra crazy people can't observe themselves. They keep making the same mistake over and over again. Now, with both normal crazy and extra crazy people, it's still, we want to get better at solving problems and get better at noticing drama and adjusting out of it for our whole lives. And when we do this, we restructure our brains and our unconscious. We restructure our brains because if you're solving problems, you're going into novelty. You're doing new things. Because, it's never, the same solution never works always. So if it's not working, then you have to be flexible, adaptable enough to come up with another one, which creates two things. One, new neural networks. So your brain gets more complex. It's one of the reasons that a lot of capacities go up for people in their 50s and 60s. Because the brain, paradoxically, as it ages, needs to make more connections to solve problems. Those new connections give you more capacities. Now, I'm not just telling myself that because I'm 74. And by the way, at 74, there's no study saying that. So, just saying. A little self-serving, but it's true. So that's one thing. Your brain gets more complex. But the other thing is, the more that you solve problems and you say, I don't want to do drama, the more your deep unconscious says, that's how I want to live. That's what I like. That's who I am. And the self begins to change. And you can see it in your reflexive reactions to things. For instance, in my dreams now, I've been working on my dreams for over 50 years. I tend to solve problems in my dreams. My deep unconscious knows that Keith can solve problems. And I'll go lucid more often than I did previously. But in the dream, I'm less likely to surrender to the drama. The monster's chasing you, so the monster's the persecutor, you're the victim. That doesn't happen anymore. If there's a monster in my dream, we start engaging in some kind of conversation and, it changes. Okay? And then what this does with us is it gives us more compassionate understanding of everything. And it tends to parallel spiritual practice, moving towards unity like it does. Now, this whole thing about drama and problem solving is central to psychotherapy. Because what do psychotherapists do? We want to help people learn how to solve problems and not to go into drama. And there are very specific ways of doing that. Where it always starts is you create a container, whereas a paradoxical thing happens. One, someone feels accepted and known for who they are. And two, they're expected to change, to grow. Carl Rogers noticed this in the 60s, and he did some research on it, and then there was more research done later. And he said that's all that therapy really is. And it's that relationship. Unconditional positive regard, empathy, congruence, those things. He said that's the healing mechanism in therapy. And when we've done analysis of variance of therapy, about 30% of positive variance is that. Now, also, Carl Rogers came up with the idea of unconditional positive regard being a defining feature of that relationship. And that's been misinterpreted by millions of couples and people over the world about unconditional love, which there is no such thing as unconditional love. All of love is conditional. And so, I won't get on my soapbox about this, but God, I've had this conversation. I want him to love me unconditionally. Well, some states of consciousness, it's really hard to love people when they're in those states of consciousness. For instance, the one that you're in right now, hard to love. Not impossible, but you get my point. And so that relating part is a central part. And when I wrote Waking Up, which is my textbook on integrally informed psychotherapy, I said therapists do 6 things. They relate, they teach, they inspire, they confront, they interpret, and they direct. But the first one was relate, because that's necessary but not sufficient to all the others. And when you're doing that with someone, you're establishing that understanding and stuff, you're wanting to help them do 3 things. You want to help them self-observe. We've talked about the witness forever. And you want to help them notice the difference between drama and problem solving, and to take responsibility for their part of not participating in drama and deciding to do problem solving. And here's how we do it. We connect with them, and we point out to them, make observations about what works and what doesn't work. And we make connections about, you do this and then this happens. And then if you do that, then that happens. And we do that in a container that has a moral valence. In that moral valence, and this is the beautiful, good, and true standards being applied to therapy, yes, you're accepted unconditionally by me. I mean, not exactly, because, you got to come on time. Some exceptions to that. You pay your bill and stuff. You got to do that. And I'm going to approve of you solving problems, and I disapprove of you surrendering to drama. And I don't just disapprove randomly, I disapprove in all 6 moral foundations. I think being unfair is wrong. Fair is good. I think harm is not good. Again, this is a moral standard. Care is good. Loyalty is good. Appropriate respect of authority is good. appropriate respect for
sanctity is good. Yeah.
Yeah. Liberation over oppression. It's good. And all the other ones tend to be characteristic of drama. Not so good. All those virtuous ones, kind of attractive to me. The other one, not very attractive. So in the container, that's the moral valence, which has a certain amount of power with people. And so in therapy, what you do is create those containers by relating. And then you have that particular approach. And in Gestalt therapy, we used to say that the heart, simple to complex, the simple heart of Gestalt therapy is pointing out the obvious and making the implicit explicit. Well, this is exactly what we're talking about. Now, when you do this, interesting things happen. In extra crazy people, they discover that they can't observe, and it gets distressing. And that's why you have the contracts about therapy and that kind of stuff. I'm going to tell you uncomfortable things if you're going to be working with me, but it's all designed to help you feel better, be more effective. Normal crazy people resist a little bit, and they'll go, yeah, you're probably right. And then my next question, of course, some version of what are you going to do about it? Because self-awareness isn't enough for change. Insight isn't enough for change. It's productive self-awareness. So now go change something. Now, if somebody has an insight and changes something, hugely diagnostic of progress. Good news. I just had a couple I worked with last week. I've been working with them for, I think, 8 or 9 sessions. And, they haven't touched each other in forever. And, they're all hostile. And they got this hostile belief, that hostile belief. And so I said, well, look, you kind of are all invested in your hostile beliefs. What do you want? They wanted to be closer. I said, well, then you're going to have to do something different. What are you willing to do different? They wouldn't do anything different for a couple. I finally said, it looks like you guys aren't willing to do anything different. Is there one thing you're willing to do different? And he said, well, yeah, I'm willing to hug her extra. I'm willing to stroke his shoulder. So they actually went home and did those things. And then came back and they described with a certain amount of triumph, which they should have. And I went, okay, these people are going to be okay. Got some feedback, did different behavior, moved in the right direction. Now it's just a matter of time before they're hot lovers with each other. I don't know how long it'll take. Maybe it'll be 2 months, maybe it'll be 6 months, doesn't matter. If they keep making progress, they'll get where they want to go. So that's what you're looking for in these situations. And interestingly enough, it really changes with value meme. And we've talked about this. You go magenta to red, to amber, to umber, to orange, to green. There's inherent blind spots in all those worldviews. And people will be behaving in a way that feels like problem solving, but it's actually, accommodating those blind spots. A good example, everybody picks fundamentalism because it's such an easy target. But, okay, so, I don't know, since I can't do any, since I can't not go to church, therefore, I am going to not go hang out with my friend at the beach who I haven't seen for 2 months and I love him so much. And you'll be bummed out. And that feels like solving the problem. And it is within that context. But it's not particularly good for that relationship, perhaps. But you got to fit within that framework. Similarly, if you're an orange, if there's something that you want to do different in your business, but you have 10% less profit, if we had better customer support, it would cost us 10% of our profit, but people would love our company more. And I want to do that. And the board says, no, we're not going to lose 10% profit just because we want our customers to be happier. Who do you think you are saying that? Well, that's actually penny wise, pound foolish when it comes to a company. But that's another good example of you're constrained by the blind spots of your value meme. That changes at teal, because at teal, if you're being constrained by something, you start feeling weird. And by the way, this is diagnostic of problem solving and drama. Problem solving feels pretty good when someone's problem solving. Somebody involved in drama, you start getting tense, irritated, frustrated, or anxious. And so, in therapy, your emotional state, it's like a console on a jet airplane. You're kind of paying attention to all your reactions. If your reactions are that, it's a pretty good sign. You're in a groove, problem solving. Things feel a little weird. If there's a red light on somewhere, drama. So putting all that stuff together. Now, and we talked about this before when we were talking about personality disorders and stuff. But this particular formulation is not just really, I used to train a lot of therapists in the 70s and a little bit in the early 80s. I wish I would have had these formulations. I would have started here rather than what I did is I taught relationships. I taught relationship therapy. And then I taught, relate, teach, inspire, confront, and so on. Mm-hmm. And all those things are relevant. But, they're relevant around, you want to be solving problems. You want to be regulating out of drama. You want to self-observe those things with a compassionate witness. So, Corey, there it is.
That's beautiful, and this is such important stuff, Keith, for a multitude of reasons. What comes to mind for me right now is how it helps us to navigate the territories that we are presented with, both the internal territories, like navigating our interpersonal relationships, for example, as well as navigating sort of the exterior world as well, because I think one of the things we often see is how this drama triangle can become easily weaponized and actually used to sort of manipulative ends, right? Like there's a manipulation tactic that's pretty well known that's called DARVO, DARVO, which stands for deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. So that would be, for example, I'm at work and I'm creating a disruptive work environment. I'm, maybe picking on someone or bullying someone, and they confront me with that. And my response is first to deny, no, I am not bullying. I've never done anything like this before. And then to attack. Actually, you're the one who's been, it kind of gets gaslighty really quick. You're the one who's been bullying me. And then you reverse victim and offender. Actually, I'm the one being bullied right now by you accusing me of bullying. This is an attack on my character, and how dare you, right? And the problem is when people are engaged in these kind of DARVO tactics, not only is it sort of getting them out of, being held accountable for their behaviors, but it's also creating this sort of interpersonal quicksand.
Yeah.
Right? You have nowhere to go once you're sort of locked in this DARVO pattern, because it just becomes one narrative, one person's narrative against another person's unfalsifiable narrative, and it's not exactly clear how to get out of that dynamic. And this is something we see everywhere, particularly now, right? We're building up to a major election in just a few days.
Oh,
and
God.
The amount of DARVO that we see in political propaganda, etc., is just insane to me.
Staggering.
Yeah, it's absolutely staggering. So this is one of the examples, Keith, of why, Integral often gets feedback, sometimes in the form of criticism, that we tend to overemphasize the upper left quadrant. Right? And a lot of people are like, you need to be doing more work in the lower right and, looking at the Israel-Palestine issues and, political events and current events and things that are happening in the world and da-da-da. And I'm like, I totally agree. That is absolutely fair enough. But there's a reason I think we need to begin in the upper left, because these are our actual doors of perception, right? The upper right, the lower right, and the lower left are all arising within our first-person upper left experience. And so if our doors of perception aren't properly sort of cleansed, right, if we're not making those transparent, then we are going to distort our perceptions of the world around us. We're going to fall into any number of biases. We're going to fall into our own sort of hidden DARVO tactics that we might be unconsciously perpetuating. So by sort of checking in first with the upper left and clearing that space, doing as much of the shadow work as we can, as much of the growing up work as we can, just so that we can sort of make these subjects into objects, that makes us more capable of both understanding what's happening out there in sort of the real world, beyond our sort of subjective experience, but also knowing how to relate to that, how to gauge whether or not our perception of these problems is accurate to begin with. Or is it just our own projections? Is it just,
I got a great story about that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, because we're ultra social, we're always influencing each other's consciousness. Speaking of the upper left, by the way, the upper left and the lower left are crucial. Because we're influencing each other, and if you're not self-observing, you're not observing how you're being influenced, right? 3 weeks ago, Becky got fished by some guy.
Oh,
He
wow.
pretended to be a PayPal thing. All right, so the guy who used to run hypnosis in LA said, if you can get somebody to say yes 3 times in a row, you've got them in trance. This guy said, oh my God, there's this $300 that we need to pay you back, and we need to fill out this paperwork. And she got her to get a form. And then the zeros didn't work on the form, so she pressed the 0 button too many times. All of a sudden, it was $300,000. And the guy said, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. Okay. So Becky, she said yes 3 or 4 times. He fished her perfectly. He hypnotized her. She went, I don't want you to lose your job. Oh God, well you can do this and I won't lose my job. Because we're sending you $300,000 now. You got to send $300,000 to Thailand. Becky ended up at the bank with the guy secretly listening on the phone, telling our banker to send $300,000 to Thailand. Okay, I know. Look at your face, Corey. That face.
Wow.
That's right. Okay, Becky's a smart person. Okay.
Yeah.
So our banker, who happens to know us, said, sorry, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so Becky went, oh, okay. She went home to talk to me about it. Well, as a matter of fact, she said, well, we got to do this or he'll lose his job. I said, oh, really? Let me talk to Sid. Sid and I had about a 90-second conversation. That was it for our relationship. So we went back to the bank and cleaned everything up. And I wasn't pissed at Becky about it. He had fished her into rescuing. That's her vulnerability because she's a caring person.
Yeah.
And when she was rescuing him, she was in the drama. And when she was in the drama, she became his victim. And then she kept doing one thing after another because she wanted to lose his job. He seemed like a good guy. And it finally kept going until the spell got broken because she's not extra crazy. She's normal crazy. Mm-hmm. And talking to me, I still am not that pissed off at that guy. I'm kind of admiring his capacity to just randomly hypnotize my wife and secretly holding a phone and telling our banker to send $300,000. I mean, that guy is good. Yeah. Really. And I wasn't pissed off because being pissed off at her would just put us more into more drama. I was just relieved that all we had to do was change all our banking numbers and stuff.
Right.
Okay? This is how vulnerable we are if we don't pay attention to the upper left. Our consciousness needs to be aware and responsible for everything we experience and do. And it needs to know the difference between problem solving and drama. She thought she was solving problems. She wasn't.
Right.
And she had the signals. She wasn't paying attention to them. She felt urgent. She felt anxious. She felt worried. She felt like she was in a hurry. She felt like she couldn't tell anybody else.
Right.
All those things. So we talk about it later. Anytime one of those shows up again, then, go talk to somebody you trust. That breaks the spell often. But more importantly, it underlines, basically, if we're responsible for everything we experience and do, we need to have that sense when there's that shift in the field, from problem solving to drama, and it's our job to do something about it. And we can do something about it in 2 different ways. One, we can relate. We can get into dialectic. We can solve it with somebody else, which is the best way to do stuff. But say that other person isn't able to do it. For instance, I was trying to, the first 30 seconds of my call with Sid, I was trying to solve the problem until I realized that Sid was an antisocial personality disorder, and we weren't going to solve any problems. And so my job was to get off the line and go, make sure that everything was going to be okay. So I handled him. And I was polite. I didn't give him a hard time for doing what antisocial personality people do.
I would have.
Yeah, I wasn't going to waste any energy on it. He said, oh, you're going to lose $30,000 in taxes. I said, I'd rather lose $30,000 to lie to my banker. He said, oh, you're rich. I said, maybe I am compared to Sid. I don't know. I mean, well, sorry, Sid. Bye-bye. Anyway, if you're paying attention and you know your own upper left energy.
That's right.
Okay? Then you go, oh, I'm in drama now. And now my job is to shift. If I can't relate out of it, I need to handle my way out of it. And, this is how you handle antisocial personality people. You kind of disengage from them. And you never send $300,000 to Thailand for them. That should be written down somewhere.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing is that, doing this kind of work, doing this kind of upper left work to wake up, to grow up, to clean up, doing all of this doesn't mean you become immune to these things, right? I mean, it doesn't make you impervious to this kind of manipulation, but it makes you more easily able to notice it sort of, sooner than later. I think, and because I think the thing we have to remember, Keith, is that we never see the world as it is.
That's
we
right.
only see how we are modeling that world. I often say things like, no one has ever seen something like an economic system. No one has ever had 100% understanding of any of these enormous systems that we are all sort of subject to.
That's right.
All we can see is our own mental models of a given system or a given reality. And it's very, very, very difficult to understand where my projections and my biases and my my inclinations and so forth, where those end and really real reality begins. That's
And
always
they blend. The take-home message to me of Becky's fishing experience was that someday somebody's going to find the right combination to hypnotize Keith.
Right.
And I'll feel urgent. It won't be about sending money to Thailand. It'll be about something else. I'll be tempted in another way. Here's something that you can do that will really help somebody out. Here's something that you do that would give you more capacity as a therapist. Here's something that you could do that would promote one of your books to help the world. Something. Like if it can happen to all of us, and when it begins to happen, the upper left will tell us if we're listening.
Right.
The lower left will always tell us if we're talking to someone that we love and trust, which is why the best thing to do ever when you're feeling weird is to talk to somebody you love and trust.
Yeah.
That breaks the spell.
Yeah.
And it does.
Yeah.
And that's one of the best ways to move from drama into problem solving.
Yeah. And Keith, the other reason I think this is really important too is because, so many of us live in a sort of green, pluralistic, postmodern culture that oftentimes sort of fetishizes victimhood.
Yeah.
And fetishizes the rescuer and projects the oppressor on everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind, so the drama triangle gets hyper exaggerated at this particular stage. Now, every stage obviously has its own sort of enactment of these dynamics, but the green one can be especially pernicious. And it can be, and it can get harder, I think, at that stage. And that actually might be one of the life conditions that brings Teal online is like, we need a way out of the quicksand. We need a way out of the perpetual victimhood and projections of oppressors everywhere. And this idea that we're surrounded by predators at all times.
Not to mention a lack of a sense of humor.
Yeah.
You can tell green pathology because there's no sense of humor.
Right.
And so say I forget to call somebody they. Okay, so I'm sorry. I'll work on it. Okay, but say that's not good enough.
Right.
All right, well, if I don't have a sense of humor, then I'm likely to get into trauma with that person. If I have a sense of humor, I go, okay, well, I guess I got to handle you right now. And so I will. I'm so sorry. You get my point. It's It's exactly what you said. What's the acronym again? It's called
DARVO. DARVO. Deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender.
Yeah, the whole projective identification thing, like taking some ugly aspect of yourself, projecting it onto somebody else, and then attacking it. I mean, that's basically been the psychological strategy of the Republican Party ever since I can remember. Yeah,
Democrats have their version of it too, right?
Democrats have different defenses.
Blame your adversary for your sins.
Yeah, that's true. Blame the adversary for your sins, and also project a sense of powerlessness in the face of vindictiveness. Okay, which makes Democrats less attractive to men. Mm-hmm. Men doesn't want to project my sense of powerlessness to the intimidator. If I have the choice between dominant and submissive, I'm going to dominate.
Yep.
The Democrats have been uncomfortable being appropriately dominant and appropriately dominating. The last person to really do that really well was Lyndon Baines Johnson. Look what he did. He changed everything with all the legislation, the Civil Rights Act, integration. I mean, all the there were some other things. I mean, I'm forgetting them, but you get my point.
Yeah, yeah.
And I agree with that. And also, it really tracks the integration of defenses line. The integration of defenses line is progressive, compassionate awareness and ability to act. Ability to be self-aware and to be flexible and adaptable around your own unconscious stuff when it comes up. Now, now we're going to get more complex. Remember, it gets simple and then it gets more complex.
That's the polarity right there, and we're always looking for the simplicity on the other side of that complexity.
Okay, so from the simplicity of drama and problem solving comes the complexity of the adaptive unconscious of our shadow self. Under threat, impulses come up to engage in drama. Now, those impulses aren't necessarily bad. They're not pathological at all. Those initial impulses, those defensive states, those distorted perspectives and amplified and numbed emotions and destructive impulses to fight or flee or diminish capacities for empathy and self-reflection. When we get threatened and that comes up, that's guiding us to protect us in a perceived dangerous situation. And in the ancestral tribes, those were superpowers. You having those capacities plus a little bit of language puts you as far away from chimpanzees as chimpanzees are from prairie voles. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's huge. But of course, our modern capacity for intersubjectivity, our modern capacity for, say, integral awakening and for understanding is as far beyond those reflexive defensive capacities as we are from chimpanzees and we are from it's that far a developmental evolutionary leap, psychosocially, psychosexually, psychospiritually.
Right.
And
that's beautiful.
And that's marked by transcendence,
right?
By awe, by big bliss, big love. And that's marked by those capacities that we have. It's pretty darn great. Yep. And how do we get there? Problem solving.
Right.
What stops us? Drama.
So I want to actually wrap some guardrails around that, Keith, because this actually reminds me of a classic conflict that we often see in relationships, particularly between one person who is predominantly coming from a more masculine essence and another person who's coming predominantly from a more feminine essence. So this can be, in relationships between men and women, or in same-sex relationships, or etc. Sure. But we often see this dynamic playing itself out where you kind of have, again, let's frame it as a polarity. As you were talking earlier, I actually made this polarity map, which I will show. Let's see. And it's basically a polarity map between drama, well, I'm actually calling it just simply relating, versus problem solving. But the reason I want to add guardrails around this is there's again, we see it in conflicts oftentimes where one person comes in and they're like, oh, I just had the worst day and I just want to kind of languish a little bit, right? I just kind of want to tell you how my day was. And then sometimes the other person will come in with like, well, here's the 3 things you can do to fix this and make sure that tomorrow's a better day than you had today.
Good point. This is so good.
And the other person in the relationship is like, look, I'm not looking for my problems to be solved right now. I'm just feeling something and I want to relate that to you. Please don't bypass what I'm feeling just so you can fix my problems, just so you don't have to feel uncomfortable by holding my drama with me, right? So
100% right.
So there's an aspect of drama which is not necessarily to be pathologized. Like, there's a healthy amount of drama. We all have drama. I mean, one of the most popular genres of art is drama for a reason, right?
Well, of course, but the example that you gave, the guy's not solving, not actually problem solving.
Right.
The problem is I feel bad. I want to feel better. And I want you to help me. Okay. And I have confidence that if I can talk about this and you can listen comfortably, that I will feel better.
Right.
That's the problem I want to solve, and I want you to do it with me. But instead, he goes, oh, no, no, you poor victim. You need to be rescued by me.
Right.
You can't do it yourself just by me listening. You have to do my solutions, says masculine Keith to, feminine, whatever, Becky. And he goes, oh, yesterday, all day, I've been next door to my house. There's this poor guy that's been remodeling his house for like 8 months. And what happens is one group fucks it up, and then the other group comes and tears out the other stuff and does it again. So he could have built 2 houses in this time. But so it was all real noisy and dusty. I went and I said, Becky, I want to complain for 30 seconds about all the noise and dust today. And she said, okay. So she listened, and I bitched I went for a whole minute. I mean, I cheated, but still. And then I stopped and said, okay, I feel better. Mm-hmm. So the real problem was, if we trust each other, if we're not, rescuing, persecuting, victiming, is what do we do to, in a relationship, make a little progress, feel better about each other? And so there you go. If the guy says, I'm about problem solving and you never solve problems.
That's right.
That's a problem.
That's why I wanted to present this as a polarity, Keith, because that problem solving requires healthy relating. And
That's
healthy
right.
relating requires a capacity for problem solving. And
That's
if we decouple those, problem solving without relating gets problematic really, really quickly. Right?
I don't think it can happen.
And if it does, it often creates more problems that need to be solved because you're being insensitive maybe, or you're again bypassing sort of the emotional content that's coming up within someone's drama. So the idea is to integrate the relating in the problem solving into something like, I actually called the integration of these two things post-issue relationships. Right?
Yes.
Because post-issue relationships are doing both at the same time, and they know when one pole or the other is maybe more appropriate in a given, circumstance, in a given context. And and I also just want to back up. I started this by saying often the masculine does this, often the feminine does this. That doesn't mean that the masculine sometimes doesn't just want to share their drama and not have it be problem solved.
Yeah, like yesterday, I wanted to complain.
Exactly. And sometimes the feminine just wants to solve the problem, and so it's not this set of stereotypes. It's just the respective predispositions that people are often coming into relationship with, and knowing how to sort of, when is it appropriate to lean on this pole, when is it appropriate to lean on that pole, while always doing our best to integrate both into something like a post-issue relationship.
Well, in relationships, problem solving, the main problem is if we're disconnected. And so how can we authentically connect?
Right.
Now everything else is secondary to that. So now that's different than if you're making, I don't know, spaceships. I mean, spaceships have to fit together right, or they blow up. So kind of comes first, having a non-blow-upable spaceship, and then how we feel about each other at the factory comes second. Okay, but
but those parts have to be in proper relationship with each other, or else it blows up.
Right? In relationship, it's we need to have that intersubjectivity working. High group emotional intelligence is one of the ways it's been studied. And if there's a disruption in that, we need to get it back and then deal with whatever we have to deal with. My favorite part of the $300,000 of Thailand story is I didn't get mad at Becky about it. 10 or 15 years ago, I would have just been super pissed off at her for letting herself get hypnotized. Now I felt, bad for her. It's embarrassing and humiliating when someone hypnotizes you, and that happened to her. So that you're right. Now that's an added level of complexity, but that's a human self-aware consciousness in relation to human self-aware consciousness.
Right.
And if you can share this language, the problem-solving language and the drama language, it really makes it a lot easier to deal with stuff.
That's right.
If you and I are discussing whether we're in drama with each other, we're probably getting out of drama with each other.
Right. Yeah.
Because you can't do that without taking 100% responsibility for yourself. So if I'm feeling victimized, or I'm feeling, like I have to rescue you, or if I'm feeling like I need to, I go, wow, Corey, I'm feeling, I don't know, whatever. I mean, I didn't feel victimized that I forgot this today.
No, I was the victim today. You were
victimized.
you were the perpetrator.
Yeah, I was a perpetrator.
Yeah.
Keith victimized. Oh my God.
I play the role of both victim and rescuer.
Yeah, right. You rescued me, boy. You really rescued me. Now, by the way, that wasn't rescue. That was help, because not only was I empowered, I felt just utter gratitude to you for delivering me from what would have been for me. This is one of my favorite times in my life, is channeling this stuff.
That's why I said, Keith, if I don't rescue right now, you're just going to be filled with shame.
You're right.
And I don't want you to experience that, buddy.
I appreciate that, Corey.
No, and all of this reinforces, again, what I was saying earlier about the reason why integral conversations often begin in the upper left as a cornerstone and also sort of as a capstone, right? Because, again, all of this is arising within our first-person subjective experience. All of this. Our entire perception of the other three quadrants is taking place right now in the upper left quadrant.
That's right.
The upper left quadrant is sort of phenomenologically primary for us. And so for me, I feel I can feel every time we have one of these conversations how it's helping me to refine, clarify, properly situate the various constructs within my own subjective experience through which I'm enacting this reality. And so every time we have one of these conversations, I've got another little tweak in my upper left that allows me to see and navigate and relate to other quadrants more skillfully, with more clarity, with hopefully more capacity for skillful action. And that again is the reason why so much of this begins with our waking up work, with our growing up work, and with our cleaning up work, because otherwise we are mixing up unseen parts of ourselves with the world that we see either out there or between us, right? I'm actually sort of colonizing some of that space with my own shadow material or my own developmental dynamics that I've yet to make into an object and bring into my own awareness.
And then how can you show up under those circumstances?
That's right. Because that's what showing up is.
If you want to show up, you got to clean up. You got to grow up. You need those. You need those capacities. I was working with a guy who was somewhat depressed last week. He had some issues in his family, and he was worried. He's scared about feeling the depression. And he said, maybe I need this. Maybe and so as we explored it, he had this understanding that a lot of people have, that if I feel some depression, there's something wrong with me. And I said, I always feel some depression. I always feel the suffering in the world, but also I always feel the beauty in the world. I always feel the joy. They're always the background hums of my existence. And when I keep them both kind of balanced, in the center of that, I'm liberated. I can become creative. I can become inspired. But if I allow myself to go too much to one side, if I deny the dark, then I'm going down into delusion and drama. If I deny the light, I'm going down into delusion and drama. Instead, I want to be able to feel those things always, and that comes with feeling the world and being the world. And so that little bit of depression will always be there, and that little bit of residual love and joy will always be there. And if I'm in touch with both of them, I tend to have more faith in my upper left orientation.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I was curious if anybody has any questions they want to ask about this. Feel free to join in here.
Yeah, and we'll see. And if nothing comes through, we'll just kind of make this another shorter episode, which is we're getting a little bit more disciplined in doing, which is I think probably a kindness that we're doing for our audience. But I just want to say I really resonated with what you were just saying. I've had depressive tendencies my entire life. And sometimes I fall into it, and it can be a little bit, even with all of the resources I have and all the relationships I have with people like you, it's still sort of up to each individual to find their process. And I fall into that oftentimes. And I know that this is a big deal for just who we are as integralists. And one of the things that we so often see is that integral, because it represents a kind of wholeness to a lot of people, right? It's a grand integration of life, the universe, and everything. That's very attractive to people who feel an innate sense of brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people who come into the integral space are coming through that trajectory of, I feel broken. I don't want to feel broken. I want to feel whole, right? I want to go from here to there. And I think what you're saying is absolutely profound. It's not a matter of going from here or there. It's a matter of, again, we're all broken. We're all whole. These two poles are always already true for us, no matter who you are. And yeah, there are spectrums on each side. Some people feel more or less broken than others. Some people feel more or less whole than others. That's absolutely true. But it's always both. There's always a simultaneity. And in fact, you wouldn't be able to even notice your own brokenness if you didn't also have that part in yourself that can recognize wholeness when it's there, right? Even if we're experiencing that as a lack, it's still there. And this is, I think, a really big point because, again, a lot of people come into the integral space sort of bleeding out in a lot of ways. It's a story that we often see. And I've seen too many people come through the integral space and, eventually take their own lives. I've had 2 staff members that I've worked with take their own lives, which is devastating. Right? It's devastating, and especially devastating because I recognize myself in that. Right? I recognize that brokenness. That's not just your brokenness. I mean, this is your version of it, but I have that in me too. And I've had the same thoughts. I've had the same darkness that a lot of people feel. And to me, this has been the gift of integral, is being able to, again, feel the simultaneity of that, to feel the brokenness but without getting too despondent, to feel the wholeness but without getting too, I don't know, self-righteous or
grandiose, without getting grandiose,
or to bypass.
Are you feeling a different relationship with that now after your
100%?
So what's that different relationship that you feel, Corey?
Well, for one, I noticed that I'd say the first thing is no matter how far I'm skewing into one pole or the other, I can still feel the heartbeat from the other pole. So it's still even if it's distant from me in this moment, I can still feel that it is there, right? That chamber of my heart is still beating. So that has helped. Like, I can feel just a little bit more connective tissue, so that when I'm falling into the darkness, it's not just complete blackness. There's still, I can see that thread, right? So that's been really helpful, and that in turn has actually allowed me to recognize that, if I am falling into that darkness, there's a part of me that's like, this is okay.
Yeah.
You can let yourself go. You can let yourself fall apart every once in a while. You can let yourself be brokenness, right? Inhabit the brokenness, because there is a compassion and a wisdom that comes through that, right? That you would never recognize if you didn't have a familiarity with the darkest corners of our own hearts. And so that has been tremendously helpful. Just by feeling the bothness of it, I can also, I can allow myself to be sort of either or as needed. And then, I would say the amount of time that it's still a natural process. I can't really force it. If I'm in a depressive cycle, I can't just push myself out of it. Right. But if I surrender to a process, if I have more trust and faith that my body mind knows what it's doing right now. I've been here before. I've made this loop many, many, many times. It gives me that much more, I guess, sort of like a quiet confidence, or maybe a faith that this is going to circle back around, and all things must pass. Right now, George Harrison is my daughter's greatest spiritual teacher, so
Oh,
she's been reflecting a lot of the George Harrisisms back to me, which is amazing and beautiful. But
oh,
yeah,
that's
so that's
adorable. That
yeah,
she's picked, the most spiritual of all three of them,
yeah,
right?
yeah, totally.
Oh,
So that's how
you're
it's been
talking
helpful for
about
me.
your wise self, Corey. How your wise self is online, even when you're depressed.
Yeah,
Noticing that?
yeah.
That's there. That's a stable feature of the Corey consciousness that you're describing.
I feel that too, and and indebted to all of these conversations I've had with you, and everything with my integral life that has helped me with that, and this becomes sort of my passion, right? Is I know how many people are coming through here feeling exactly like I did when I was 19, 20 years old when I discovered this stuff, and I just felt like I was a bug against a windshield, just smashed and broken and bleeding out, and feeling sort of this upswell that Integral has provided for me. I want to share that with everyone who's coming into this space. Like, this kind of healing is possible, and that doesn't mean it's all love and light and rainbows. And I don't think any of us even want that if that was even possible, which it's not. But things get better, and our body minds really do know how to find their way through.
Well, so many people, including me, came to Integral feeling like nobody could understand them, and they
Yeah.
could never really thoroughly. Because of the meta theory, there's this capacity for deep dialectic, and at least for me, Sangha emerges out of it.
Yep.
Because I just couldn't find Sangha in the traditional places.
Yep.
I was telling a guy in one of my groups, I really like the practices, particularly the Eastern practices, Zen and Vajrayana, and I just can't stand the mythology. I mean, no offense, no offense to White Tara and Kali and all those. I mean, and Krishna is my guy, obviously, so it's not like I don't like any of the mythology, but the practices. And what the practices do is they take you to the territory. And once you get in the territory, you go, okay, now I know. Now when you listen to people talk, you know the territory. We need to find our own way there. I mean, I found my ways there, and I still do every day, as do you.
Mm-hmm.
And the beautiful thing about Integral is that it doesn't matter what our path is into the waters. We're all having this subjective sense of connected, sharing that with each other. And when we're doing it in the dialectic, when you and I, informed people, are engaged in the dialectic at teal altitudes about the human condition, you and I are enacting the turquoise psychology, the meta psychology of the 21st century. And that's just right out of Integral. That right there's just like a flower coming out of the earth, one of those quick motion things.
That's beautiful. It's beautifully said. And again, I'm grateful for this thing that we do together, brother.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I'll just read these couple comments that came through, and then we'll close the show.
Sure.
So Nick says, this was amazing. Thank you, Keith and Corey. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for watching.
Thanks,
and for
Nick.
being here with us today. Judy says, awesome discussion, very clarifying and validating. Deep bows to you both. Deep bows to you, Judy. Karen says, thank you for another interesting episode. They're all interesting, right? Like I feel like we haven't had many stinkers, Keith. This was,
I'd be curious which one's the stinker.
yeah, maybe, yeah. I'd be curious too. And Andrea says, not a question, but thank you very much for this. I find this pointing to discernment and feeling the energy returning to our center when feeling out of bounds is helpful. It's a beautiful way to put it, Andrea. Thank you.
That's right.
So hey, that's it.
Thank
Keith.
you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
watching.
much, man.
Oh, and thank you, Corey. This is fun. I think that one of the beautiful things about psychotherapy, I can't believe after 50 years that I can still be finding stuff that lights me up and that makes connections that I haven't felt in exactly that way. And I'm going, wow, Integral's like that too.
That's exactly how I feel about Integral. I keep falling in love with it.
Yeah, there's more. It's a cosmology that we're inhabiting, but that is always revealing itself through us, to us, and then through the other people around us. That where we inspire each other. This is why I'm hopeful. This is why I have great faith in the evolution of consciousness.
Regardless of what happens on Tuesday.
Regardless of what happens. Talk about drama.
Yeah, exactly, right?
On the note of, drama writ small and drama writ large. We're in the problem solving here at Integral.
That's right. That's right. Well, Keith, I love you, baby, and I look forward to getting back together with you next month.
Yeah, I'll be on time next month, I guarantee.
Yeah, we'll see about that. And to everyone watching, thank you so much. Right now, if you're at home watching this, I'm about to run a teaser for a new web course that we just launched called Overflowing Purpose. Keith Witt, you are a part of this course. It's an absolutely extraordinary course. I really hope everyone checks it out. So now watch this video.
Solving the meta-crisis is clearly a multi-generational endeavor which requires the collaboration of a huge number of individual human beings. So we obviously need to be humble about the expected impact of our contributions. At the same time, like the philosopher Lao Tzu said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, which implies that ultimately every forward movement counts. So what is an appropriate first step to begin addressing the meta-crisis? Arguably, it starts with framing. After all, according to cognitive scientist John Vervaeke, the way we frame a problem influences which type of solutions we're able to perceive.
We're moving back now into the time of big frameworks in cognitive science. Predictive processing, the free energy, Carl Friston's work, my work on relevance realization, 4E cognitive science, and they're all trying to integrate together. I think, and they're making tremendous progress and really enriching our understanding of cognition, the nature of the self, but also, mystical experience, transformative experience. What the last 2 centuries of philosophy has shown is that all the ways we try to sever the subjective from the objective, the analytic-synthetic distinction, the fact-value distinction, the theory-fact distinction, all of these things have collapsed under the work of seminal philosophical argumentation. So if you get that notion of that conformity relation and levels of reality, then you get Plotinus's argument that as I know in this participatory sense, not just propositionally, but as I know, I actually have higher levels of reality or deeper levels of reality disclosed to me. So this is not transcendence just as psychological improvement. This is transcendence that has significant and important epistemological and ontological import.
In the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis video series, John emphasizes the importance of framing by presenting viewers with the so-called 9 dots puzzle. For our purposes here, we'll use a 9 circles puzzle so we can add an extra layer of meaning at the end. Okay, so imagine yourself sitting at a desk with a pencil in one hand and an eraser in the other. In front of you, you have a piece of paper with 9 circles printed on it. Your task is to link all 9 circles using no more than 4 straight lines without lifting your pencil off the paper. Now, if you've never seen this puzzle before, you might start out like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, and realizing that doesn't work, you might erase your attempt. Perhaps 1, 2, 3, 4. No, that doesn't work either, so you erase your attempt again. After a while, you might either curl up on the floor in the fetal position and pretend that none of this ever happened, or you might realize that you're framing the problem in a particular way which prevents you from solving the puzzle. Indeed, perhaps you suddenly realize that you're imagining a boundary around the puzzle. And then, once you expand your frame, you come up with the following solution. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now for the extra layer. While pondering the meta-crisis, John Vervaeke reflected on what connects, among other things, hyperpolarization, health crises, inequality, trauma, technological disruption, sense-making failures, perverse incentives, war, environmental degradation, etc. And in doing so, he concluded that the meta-crisis is fundamentally being fueled by a meaning crisis. We'll return to this theme later in the course, but for now, to give us an impression of how people generally feel about our world nowadays, here's systems scientist Alexander Laszlo.
Well, this comes back to life in a VUCA world, right? We mentioned volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And the psychologists will talk about it as being RUPT, rapid, unpredictable, paradoxical, and tangled. And these terms are arising now, weren't here even 20 years ago, because they're starting to be descriptions of our world, our experience of things being rapid, unpredictable, paradoxical, and tangled. Like, I don't know what to do. How am I supposed to run my life? How am I supposed to even make sense of the news? So these kind of reactions, right, when we're dealing with the world that seems to be out of balance, how do we find our own balance?
Well, the fact that it is a meta crisis implies that it covers a broad number of areas. And so we don't just refer to it as a crisis, we refer to it as a meta crisis. And the best way, or the only way to handle a meta crisis is with a meta framework. And the meta framework that we approach the problem with will, as Vervaeke says, help determine the outcome of how that problem is handled. The integral framework that I've developed does in fact attempt to integrate all of those theorists that you mentioned, and basically it sort of attempts to give an overview of all of reality.
If fewer people have more of the resources, you create these political dislocations and this sense of alienation that really undermine the entire fabric of liberal democracies, as we've seen. And so the US is a great example of this. The rise of populism, right-wing populism in the US that we have seen is due, as we know, to several, large factors, immigration being an important one, but equally important is an economic dispossession that more and more of the country has felt. They feel put upon by the elites. In our case, it's the elites in Washington, D.C., and it's the elites on Wall Street. And it's actually a fair critique, right? The Wall Street and Washington, D.C. have had a symbiotic power partnership for decades that is meant to promulgate and increase capital. It is, as a complex autopoietic social system, its guiding thrust is to increase itself, is to grow the value of capital and to grow the size of capital and to use political levers to do it. To the extent that they have succeeded, you're also making angry a lot of people who feel like the game is stacked against them. And so by virtue of the very fact of wealth inequality and the way in which it distorts a system, it also generates the seeds of its own destruction.
Humans can take anything and turn it to good or evil. So there's really a moral dilemma, not just spiritual intelligence, because moral behavior can come from earlier stages on the spiral. We can have moral behavior from blue, from purple, but it tends to come from the cool colors. When we think about morals, we tend to think about collective concern. The cool colors on the spiral are the we colors versus the me colors. Red tends to be about power at any price, and red is the biggest risk to using artificial intelligence for evil. What do we do about that? I have no doubt that people will use machine learning, unfortunately, in ways that we would consider immoral and harmful and destructive to our collective good. Is destruction always a bad thing? The image of Shiva dancing in the ring of fire and the destruction creation image. Does something have to be destroyed for the next thing to be created is often a quandary. And is there a way to destabilize the old in a necessary way to make space for the birth of the new? Is there the potential for a wonderful second-tier, spiritually intelligent, Gaia embodying next level of humanity? I hope so. And do we have to go through some crap to get there? Probably. Is AI going to enable part of the crap we have to go through? Probably.
So my version of a sustainable world would be one in which we can see all of these worldviews as essentially portals into whatever version of sustainability makes the most sense or carries the greatest meaning for the people that hold that worldview. And so that's not a typical way of thinking about it, because it might not be the one that you or I necessarily hold. You know, it might look different in how the person is interpreting it or making sense around it. But I think that might be the way to go. And so that means that the visions for a sustainable world become various. They become themselves diverse.
On two sides, let's say Israeli side and Palestinian side, you have radicals who are determined to polarize in a negative way, who are determined to basically destroy the other. There can be only one. There can be this truth or that truth, basically, and for the other one, there is no space. When they get the upper hand, what happens is that the moderates on their side end up being framed as betrayers of that side and lumped with the enemy. So let's say you had a moderate on the Palestinian side, then a radical on the Palestinian side would see them as being the enemy because they were on the other side and they weren't true believers in the cause. Same both sides. And so what the model says is that you have to find a way to create middle ground for the moderates to be able to find solutions. And if we understand that developmentally, the moderates have more complex intelligences, so we're able to see more of reality and see more of the subtleness of it. And that means for that to be able to happen, the two sides have to both repress their radicals at the same time and be very kind of, in terms of the boundaries we were talking about earlier, be very strong on that. So if you don't do that, then the moderates, the middle ground is stripped away and there is no space for people to come to a solution that is greater than the sum of the parts. That's a maybe more granular perspective on how you generate conditions for enabling the interconnectedness to happen rather than the polarizing forces. Yeah.
Do what you can where you are. And by that I mean, what skills do you have? What are some of the unique gifts that you have? How can you further develop yourself where you are with what you do? How can you better communicate verbally and in writing? If you're a musician, how can you play even better yourself and with other people? That's what it comes down to. How can you better play, using a musician as an example? How can you better play yourself and with others? That's what it comes down to. And if enough of us learn to play better ourselves and with other people, that can then grow out further. But you gotta do what you can where you are with what you have to work with. And we usually have more to work with than we think. Be lifelong learners. Take time to go within yourself and have a balance between activity and repose. Meditate and contemplate. Also engage in action. We have to be reflective, but we also have to be, and this is like American pragmatism, we got to take action in the world. And we have to then say, what's been the results of that action? And work to continue refining as we elaborate and extend ourselves through culture. And we extend ourselves with the ground of being that we all share. But those differences that come up in the variations on that same theme, these are all things that we can do. But start where you are with what you have to work with and do what you can where you are.